Hey guys, welcome back to the Ground Up Show. I'm your host, Matt D'Avella. Thanks so much for tuning in, for watching, for listening. I have an amazing guest today. Her name is Antonia Hilton. She's a correspondent for HBO's Vice News Tonight. She covers politics and civil rights. She's incredibly sharp. One of my favorite interviews that I've done on this show. And it's her first podcast ever, so that's exciting. We discuss a little bit of the politics and civil rights stuff, but really more so we delve into her path and how she got here. I think really more than anything, it's a story of not waiting for opportunity, but of making opportunity, of making things happen. Even when there's no job listing that you want on LinkedIn, she went out and she found the work that she was passionate about. It really, really inspiring, and I think you're really going to like this interview. But before we get into that, I do have a couple quick housekeeping items. You might notice that the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, it looks a little bit different. That's because I don't have any tripods. You may be asking, Matt, why don't you have any tripods? That's a good question. So I was just out in San Francisco with Josh and Ryan from theminimalist.com. We're working on a new project. We're really excited about it. And we were in San Francisco. And it was the last city of the stint for me with them out there. And I got lazy. I left my tripod bag in the van overnight. That was the mistake because that night I was forced into minimalism when somebody broke into our van and stole $1,000 worth of gear, including 2 of my tripods. That was a bummer, but I have insurance, right? Good news, right? No, because my deductible for insurance was $1,000. So literally lost $1,000 in gear, but the show must go on. I still am really passionate about this podcast. Want to keep it going. Want to keep the videos at a high quality. But while I don't have tripods for the next couple of weeks, I will be using stacks of books and t-shirts as a tripod. So, that's why the podcast is going to look a little bit different for the next couple of weeks. On the last episode, I sat down with assistant director and producer Matthew Webb. He wrote the book Set Life about his experience working on huge films like Pirates of the Caribbean, Mad Max, Hacksaw Ridge, really amazing films. His book Set Life is incredible. I'm buying 5 copies of that book for my audience. I want you guys to gather some of the helpful advice from this book, how to land your first job in film, how to keep it, and how to excel. I think it's going to be hugely valuable for anybody who's looking to one-up their game. Just leave a review of the Ground Up Show, no matter how many stars, and I'll send you the book out. I'm going to send it out to the first 5 people that email me at hello@mattdiavella.com. I'll get you guys those books. I think you'll like it. Last episode, I announced my mission to interview The Rock on this show, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I just got off the phone with him this morning. That's not true. I made that up. I haven't yet talked to him, but I want this audience to take part in it. I want you guys to be here for the journey. So if you have The Rock's number, if you've got his email address, let me know, and we can make some magic happen. I want The Rock in that chair. The Rock, we may have to unscrew the sides of the chair, but I do want The Rock to sit there. Let's see. Okay, and finally, last bit of news, pretty exciting personal news for me. I'm moving to LA. I just got an apartment about a week and a half ago in West Hollywood. A lot of my friends are making fun of me, calling me Hollywood now that I made a documentary and it's on Netflix. Obviously, you got to move to LA. It's actually not the reason why we're moving, more of a personal decision. My partner Natalie's from Sydney. LA is right in between there. So that's really the major factor for us moving out there. Though I am excited to be in LA, to be around a lot of other creatives in the film world. If you are yourself in LA, let me know. Love to meet up for coffee. You got my email address. Hit me up and we'll meet up, and you guys can show me the best coffee in LA because I'm looking to get set up. I don't know much about it. Anyway, let's get to the interview with Antonia. Really excited to share this with you guys. Would love to hear what you have to think about it. Leave a comment on the YouTube video once you're done watching or listening. And now, without further ado, here it is. tell me a little bit about the work you do right now, and then we can kind of delve back to see how you got here.
So the work I do right now, I am a correspondent for Vice News Tonight on HBO, which is a cool nightly news show on HBO. Sort of the sibling show to the documentary series that Vice has had for years now. And I think the thinking around that was, people had responded so well to the Vice's like gritty style of like getting their storytelling, and they wanted to now kind of have a daily version of it with shorter stories, short meaning like 6 to 10 minute stories, so still solid, like news reporting, but you could kind of capture an audience and have them come back every day. And so I joined the team in August before our launch in October, and it has been so much fun because Vice isn't really a startup anymore, but the team we've created is kind of like a startup within Vice because we're new and we're kind of figuring out what the fuck we're doing.
Yeah.
And so I got to report like right out the gate on prison riots. I got to go on the Clinton campaign trail for weeks. I've reported from Chicago on gun violence. They let me do anything that's sort of at the intersection of politics and civil rights. Those are kind of becoming more and more redundant all the time. But I kind of have like free reign to explore, which is, I'm so lucky for. I'm 23 and I'm on an HBO show and I get to like travel to more states than I've ever been to previously in my life. So I'm pretty lucky right now.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It seems like, most people would like work their entire lives to get to this place. But I think that also comes with, I imagine it's probably difficult to realize you've achieved so much and you're at such an amazing place in your career so early. That do you have any like big crazy dreams or goals for the future, or is you're like, because it must be like when you graduated you'd be like, working for Vice, like kind of creating my own stories and having so much freedom to create the stories I want to make would be the dream.
Yeah, when I graduated, which was in 2015, I had no idea what was going to happen. I went to Mike News First 10 days after graduation. Like I literally took my dorm room and I moved it into the shittiest apartment with like no natural light, like the worst shithole in New York City.
Yeah. You're not from New York originally?
No, I have family here, but I'm from Boston.
Okay.
Didn't know anything about like what neighborhoods were like.
New York is tough.
Everything sucked at first.
Yeah.
Like I had no friends. I lived in this horrible dark place.
When you move to New York, like it's funny when you start looking at places and start trying to figure out, you kind of go there and you're like, all right, I'm going to spend $1,000 on rent. And then you start looking and you're like $1,500. Like it goes up so quickly and you're like, shit, all right, how am I going to
And then you do the math of like how much you're going to lose in taxes. And at first $1,500 seems like I can do that with my, no.
Yeah,
no, really.
It's very tight when you first move to New York. I mean, out of college, it's crazy. It's nice that you had family here, though.
I did.
At least
they
moral
helped
support.
me. Like they gave me like free furniture and stuff. Like things like I just would not have been able to purchase at first.
So you moved here within 10 days.
Moved in 10 days. Didn't know what was going on, and I came to Mike, and I went to Mike because they were just starting with video at the time, and actually everybody was kind of just getting into video at the time, and there weren't all the like rules and set, like there weren't really like view count goals, and there weren't, nobody had an idea of like what video was going to look like for Facebook, for social. And so Mike and all these other places were kind of just throwing whatever at the wall. And I kind of saw that as I was graduating, reached out to people I knew there, interviewed with Billy Disney, who was once on the show.
Billy Disney, that's right.
And kind of just convinced them like there was no job description available. But I was like, hey, I interned in all this stuff. I've worked on some documentaries. I know a lot about these subjects. Let me just like grind for a summer for you. And if I do a good job, will you give me a job at the end of that summer? And that's how I got into it. So I was doing production first. I didn't have a plan to be a reporter fronting my own work on a show like the show that I'm on now. Like there was no plan. It was like, I want to tell stories. I know how to tell stories. All I've done my whole life is like consume and try to tell stories. So I just kind of picked the place that was going to let me first like dive into doing all of that. And so I was at Mike for a little over a year, then got the opportunity to come over to Vice and just kind of completely changed. And first, I frankly was afraid. Like I was like, I've never been on camera. I like, like I watched Vice's stuff and I was like, I've never been to the Congo. Like, I don't know if I can do that. But they like just so throw everyone on the show into, like, people are smart and they have, most of them are older than I am, so frankly they have more experience, but we're all figuring out as we go, and like this learning curve has been so steep. And so just in probably the 2 months first 2 months I was at Vice, I learned more than I maybe have like in an entire year of college or like an entire year of doing anything else.
I think you have to do that. You have to throw yourself in situations where you're absolutely terrified and you have no idea how you're going to push through.
That's when you grow the most.
Yeah. And I imagine you've had some mentors during some of these transitions. And how many of those come internally, like say at Vice or Mike, and how many of those are outside for you?
It's probably 50-50. So I have an aunt who used to be, was doing sort of broadcast news and has reported for a very long time. And so as I started getting into doing my own original reporting, she was my major outside source. And I would just I'd send her links to anything I was doing. Every video I produced for Mike, I sent her and was like, we just watch this for 3 minutes and tell me what sucks. You know, like, I don't need you to like compliment me, pat me on the back. That's what my mom and dad do.
You got people to do that. You do need that.
I have my yes men. They're like, hey, Tony, you're awesome.
Yeah.
Sparkly videos on Facebook. You know, like I have those peeps. Like, I need you to tell me when I suck. And she's very good at that. She's like, this was awful. Who is this person? Why'd you tell? Like, you know, she just was really straight up. That was cool. And then I had internal people like Billy. And the awesome thing about Billy as my first boss was that, like, he is really quirky and he's creative and he doesn't, you know, like, he doesn't really see himself as an authority figure, even though he is a really knowledgeable person who, you know, like on paper is an authority figure. We kind of clicked and he was like, you have some good ideas. Like, if you can execute on them, like, I'll let you go do them. Like, fly. Like, you know, it was more of like a collaborative and relationship. That whole team that we built out, we were all really friends who just like every day came to work being like, what stories do we want to tell? What parts of the country do we want to go to? What do we think is undercovered? Whose perspective hasn't been told? We were working first sort of through Liz Plank's show, then with Darnell Moore on a docuseries about activist movements. And between those two shows, one that was sort of, you know, Liz Plank's work is sort of the intersection of like women, feminism, and politics. And then Darnell Moore's was really race, politics, and sort of, especially when looking at that time, you know, what was happening in terms of policing across the country. I mean, still is, but at that time especially, we had so many opportunities then to chase so many crazy stories that people just weren't doing a good job on. And all like 5 of us at the time were like Billy, just like weird people who came in, wanted to throw ideas on a board and then like figure out how we could get the money and get the resources from Mike to go do it. And so he wasn't a mentor in the like, sit down and, you know, Antonia, like, these are the steps you take to be successful. Or Antonia, I can really see you being this role at this company. Like, here's how you get there. Like, Billy's not that, that type of person.
Yeah, and he seems like the kind of person that you can be vulnerable in front of, at least from my perspective. And I imagine working for a company, there are people that would feel like they can't necessarily be 100% honest with, you know, maybe their hesitations about a project or a story they're making to say, I don't know how we're going to pull this off. Because a lot of times you have to have this air of like, everything's perfect. I've got everything under control. That way nobody kind of falters in their judgment of you. Do you feel as if, at least most of the people that you work with now, you can do that? Or do you have to have this fake it till you make it?
There's a little more structure around me. I mean, there are definitely, first few months, a lot of faking it till I made it. Like, I would go out and be terrified. One of my first I'm like, seriously, like, heart like gonna fall out of my throat. I don't know, like that kind of terrified. One of my first major packages that I shot and reported and fronted was a story about Gavin Grimm. And I mean, it ended up not going to the Supreme Court fully or sort of being remanded back right now. But his case is sort of the landmark story about transgender students in the country right now. And he's 17 years old, younger than me. But I was like, he is just, you know, what he went through in the small town. He grew up in Virginia. You know, to give background about his story, he comes out as transgender his sophomore year, tells the school this, and first they are fine. And they're like, go use the men's restroom, Gavin. We don't care. We'll call you by Gavin. And for the most part, his teachers and the superintendent are supportive. And then parents start to complain, people start calling into the school, and the school board does a complete flip. And they decide that Gavin either sort of has to use the women's restroom, or they're going to create these old janitor's closets and turn them into a neutral restroom, basically for Gavin to have to use in a corner far away from his classrooms on his own. So of course the ACLU gets involved, and this escalates up to a Supreme Court fight. And he's 17, but I'm like terrified to meet this kid because he's been through more than the vast majority of people have been through in just his short years of life. He's just so eloquent, so in control of his story, and so clear about, the injustices that he's faced, and how he planned at the time to fight his school. He's now graduated just a couple weeks ago. And I had never been on camera, never worked with the producers and shooters I was going into the field on, and was just like blown away by this kid. So I like rolled up to his house in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, and I just like I was kind of shaking. And so there is faking it till you make it. If you watch that piece, you can't see me shake. I'm smiling. Gavin and I end up getting along really well. And so kind of it all melts away, but there is a shit ton of just being like, I need to tell this story. I may not feel totally inside like I'm qualified to tell that story. But someone somewhere has given me the opportunity to do it. Like, I'm going to dive in and just like do my best to make it what it deserves to be. And that was very much how I approached that story. And so, there are people around me at Vice who give me structured advice. We have people who've been won 15 Emmys, and they were at NBC forever, and they know everything there is to know about the traditional news industry. But they, I think, also have at Vice, just because of what Vice has been for years now, have this spirit of like, we're not going to tell you how to do everything. You're going to be thrown in. You have to be responsible for the research, for your own reporting. I'm not going to they don't give me interns. I don't have people who give me fact sheets before I go into the field. That's me. I do that. So,
a lot of people do have assumptions about certain programs, especially if it's an entity like Vice, where you're like, oh, well, they probably have 20 writers that tell them everything.
No, when you see anyone in any Vice story, they've done that research. They wrote that voiceover that you're listening to. We're not actresses and actors who show up and other people have told these stories for us, and we just stand there and look nice. No, we're really working hard.
Yeah, which is incredibly important in terms of telling the story and not being phony, because at least the traditional news media tends to have that role or appears to be. Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
I won't say all of them. There's a little bit more of that, or you can get away with that, or there's so much more staff around them that they don't have to lift everything on their own. But they're just because of the resources, because of the culture at a place like Mike and then a place like Vice, you're gonna pull your weight, if not your weight and a half.
How much growth do you see in yourself between these projects, where you go? Because I've had very similar experiences where legit panic attacks before a shoot, where I'm like hyperventilating, and I'm like, what the fuck? How am I going to do this? I've never interviewed somebody that's this intelligent, or that I'm just do not feel prepared going into these situations. Right. But I'm like, I just got to do it. I got to go through it. Or if it's speaking in front of a crowd of 200, 500 people, it's you just have to do these things. And then you the entire day or two before that event, you may just be terrified, but then you go through it and you feel like, okay, wow, okay, I did it. I feel great having done that.
I just did that.
Yeah, that was me. But then also the next time, you're not going to be, it's going to be easier, but you're still going to be terrified.
Yeah.
How much growth have you seen in yourself over these few years, where you're going from one to the next, and the sheer volume of times going through these difficult projects and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations? How much growth have you seen in yourself if you step back?
A lot. It's funny talking about growth, because sometimes I step back and I'm like, I've been in the game for relatively 5 minutes. When I talk to some of my mentors who've been doing this for decades, I'm like, wow, they must think I'm a toddler or something. But no, I do see so much growth. Just even from those first interviews where I couldn't breathe, I was so nervous. Or what it really was, is it's I would be having conversations with people like I'm talking to you now, and be anticipating the next thing. I'd be trying to think I have to nail this politician on this thing, and it's going to be my third questions, that was where my
chess,
right. I was thinking it was a game of chess, and some of that is healthy. You want to go in with a plan. You want to go in with things you need to get out of an interview or get out of a character. elements of their personality that you want to tease out by talking to them in a certain way. Definitely need that, but you don't want to go in with like so much of a plan that you're not listening. Because most of being a good storyteller actually just requires you to shut up so much of the time. Like you just actually need to listen to people. You're not going to tell their story correctly. You're not going to find the elements of it that other reporters, other storytellers have missed if you're not actually just being quiet most of the time and thinking and reacting to what's happening around you. And so I learned better how to listen. And I think like literally you can watch my work and you'll see as I've progressed that I'm listening more, and that my questions react more to sort of naturally like what I hear, what's going on around me, and not so much like a plan that I came in or a vision that I previously had for what the piece would be.
Yeah, that's my favorite quote is I did an interview actually for Mike.com with Matthew Heineman. It was the Mike 50.
Yeah.
And interviewed him for it because Billy brought me onto that. Billy brought me onto that project. And he said, if your story doesn't change along the way, you're not listening. And I was like, that's like on point. And actually it relieves a little bit of stress and tension that you put on yourself, especially having high expectations going into a project. You just have to kind of let it go. How do you, going into an interview, I always feel like, especially if you're interviewing somebody that gets interviewed a lot, like say if you're going somebody high profile that's just sitting down talking with reporters or journalists every day, and you want to create a story, an experience for them that's different, right? You don't want to just go in and say, okay, here's the 10 questions they get asked every time, because they go on autopilot and then it's like, here's the scripted canned responses. How do you get out of that, and how do you approach these interviews in a way that you're going to be able to get something that's actually genuine and not like the guise of being genuine?
I'd say probably the two ways in which I'm able to do that, and some people you can't do that with because like they are pros. They won't show you anything about themselves that they haven't planned to publicly show. So sometimes you can't do it. But a lot of times, you know, I'll be sitting in a politician's office and usually their staff lets you in first and you can set up, and they haven't come in yet. And I'll just look around and notice,
go through their desk and
no, I'm not that creepy. I'm not like going through their belongings, opening their wallet. No, but I'll like, they have all these cute, weird pictures of their kids or things that they did when they were 20. I was in a politician's office the other day and I noticed there were all these, like, you know, there was a fireman's hat and there was a lot of, sort of small trinkets and books like related to sort of being a man in uniform. And so you pick up those little things about their personality. It may have nothing to do with what you're there to talk about, but I can just sort of get a sense of like who they are in their private life. And then when they sit down and we're miking them before we're rolling, I just start asking them about like who they are, or that weird thing I saw, or like the strange quote they have in the corner up there that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, can you explain that? Like, why is that your motto or whatever, you know? Kind of call them out, like kind of disarm them a tiny bit. Because if you can get them to start talking about like, when I was a fireman 20 years ago, then once I like turn it on and I now need to talk about something serious, I need to confront them about something that's going on. We're also like, I wouldn't say that we become friends, but you know, I've showed him I'm a human being who has some interest in him as a human being. And, you know, that he can respond to me and he can bring up thoughts or he can bring up ideas about whatever situation we're discussing. And it can be like a little bit freer and loose, you know, like you don't just have 20 minutes to hammer through whatever the major Trump talking point is for the week. Like we can like be real for a few minutes at the end, middle, start, middle, and end. And that's what I usually try to like kind of subconsciously or kind of casually show anyone that I interview, from a politician to Gavin Grimm. I want them to know like I'm a real person here who wants to tell a true story. And that means you have the opportunity to, if you think that like a question I ask you doesn't make sense, like say that to me. Be like, no, like you clearly think this, but like this is actually, let me walk you through why this situation is something like people are getting wrong. You know, I love those moments in my interviews where like I'm able to kind of like walk through step by step with someone and they're talking to me like I'm a real human and not like I'm a screen that they're trying to like get a message to the outside world via, you know, and a lot of that requires like just looking around at their life and finding ways to just be like, remind yourself what was like psychologically, like they're not like a chess piece for me to tell my grand story in. But also to, you know, subtly just remind them, like, you have a bit of control over this too. Like, you shape what this story is as well. And there's a lot of deliberate and subtle ways you can do that.
Right. It seems like there's a tone that you're trying to set for these interviews. Is that something that, do you have an element of letting them know that tone beforehand? Like, hey, just want to let you know before we get into this interview, like, if what I'm saying doesn't make sense or whatever, we can certainly hash it out. Or is that something that naturally transpires?
Sometimes you can say things like that. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I interviewed a few weeks ago a sex trafficking survivor. And anytime you interview someone who's very traumatized and has had a situation that many people cannot relate to, or there's a lot of stigma around it, I start any interview like that by setting a lot of, I wouldn't call them ground rules, because it's not rules that they can't break. It's more rules that I'm telling them I won't break. You know, anytime you need to stop, anytime you want to go to your room for a second, you need to collect your thoughts. Like, I'm here for as long as it takes for you to do this interview.
That's
like,
amazing.
I'm not going to rush you. I'm not going to like yell at you. Like, I'm listening to your story, and I want to know all that you're willing to share with me. And I make that so clear in interviews. It's especially important in interviews like that. But yeah, even in interviews where, like, I'm probably gonna be laughing half the way through because, like, it's like such a crazy or ridiculous situation, and like the air in the room is like almost a little bit chummy. You know, I'll even say to people like, "Hey, you know, like, this is not a live show.
Yeah.
You need to sneeze. I'd rather not I'd rather you not sneeze in the middle of like a really nice thought. So, like, sneeze and like let's keep it going." And like and then sometimes people forget that. They're like, "Oh, like I can take a sip of water." Like,
I can dab the sweat off my face.
Yeah, or like if I have a sweat mustache, like, I can wipe it off. And I'm like, I'd actually prefer you do that. Like, you know, don't like sit there insecure because you have like some itch.
And it allows them to loosen up a little bit.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They don't feel as stiff.
So it's better for everybody.
When did you always know you wanted to be a storyteller and a filmmaker?
You know, it's funny. I asked my dad a couple weeks ago. I was like, "Dad, like, are you kind of surprised about like what I do? You know, are there any things like signals I showed when I was younger that like showed that this might be a path I went down?" And he reminded me that, like, from basically since I could talk, all I did was tell stories, and often they weren't true. He was like, "You were a pathological liar." He was like, "You would just come home from school and have like these like magical stories of like what happened to you at school."
Oh my God.
Like, he actually has a video of me telling him about a leprechaun that I caught in first grade. And I explained to him in like really weird detail, like how I captured this leprechaun with my friend, where I'm keeping it in my classroom, how long it's going to be. Like, there's just so much detail. Like, I clearly had like thought about this story I was going to tell my dad about a leprechaun that didn't exist. I've never seen a leprechaun. Sure. I think I'd remember. Yeah. And then came home and like gave it to him in this like 10-minute like theatrical performance. And he was like, "So yeah, I'm not that shocked, you know, like, you've been doing this your whole life. Like, first they were like magical stories out of your imagination, and now you're telling the truth, but so it's different, but like, you've always wanted to tell stories."
What age was this? Was this?
This is like literally apparently since I could talk. Like, so I would have been really small. I don't know.
And then through school, was there any evolution of that beyond just storytelling to family and friends? Was there like any bigger stages that you were on?
Well, I knew when I went to college that I really wanted to study history. And history, I think to some people, is boring. Like, they don't like reading about things that happened. But history is actually being reshaped, or you can look at things in just a few years' time. That political situation or technological development has entirely different meaning from whatever perspective or place you happen to be looking at it. And so it is a new story every single time. And historical retellings are just that person's retelling of what happened. So there can be, of course, a million different accounts of how one battle happened at some point in time. Yeah,
we can't even figure out what's happening today.
Right, we can barely figure out like what happens in the halls of, you know, like the Capitol. Like, we of course don't know what happened 100, 200, 300, thousands of years ago. So I just kind of, I think, probably was drawn to that because of the same opportunities that gave me to kind of dive in, look for new evidence, look for new perspectives, and then like retell something in history as a story that's still kind of true to what people know, but also maybe gives them something they didn't know or they didn't look at before. And then when I joined the history and science department which is really sort of the history of science. And so what you're doing is looking at historical events from the perspective of like medicine, mental health, tech, physics, whatever. And I became obsessed with the intersection of criminal justice and mental health and psychiatry. And I wrote a thesis sort of all about how the deinstitutionalization of mental asylums is sort of connected to the rise of mass incarceration in the mid-20th century. And so light, airy, casual
just your
stuff.
everyday Sunday morning read.
You know, like the things I talk about with my friends at the bar. So pretty like serious stuff. And but it was undercover. So probably the most like, and it almost now I think probably sounds cliche, but really I think like probably what's helped me stand out at different points, like in school, at Mike, now at Vice, is that I've been good at finding stories that are undercovered. And so when in the case in college, it's, you know, people haven't looked at how mental health impacts incarceration rates, and then sort of what the racial overlays are on that. When I went to Mike, it was like, I mean, just the format in which we were working, social video was new in and of itself, but Liz Plank, Darnell Moore, the talent that I was working with, like we were really ambitious in shooting stories about, you know, with communities that were undercovered, about issues that were undercovered, or in our opinion, not properly covered. And then at Vice, I made my name by there. I rose from originally I was an AP when I first signed on to Vice, and I'm a correspondent. And those things happened because I kind of made my name seeking out stories that could be told in a really interesting visual way. And for some reason, people had really failed on them. So, you know, I was able to, for a prison story, get footage inside a prison that prisoners who had contraband cell phones like took on their own. You know, something that wasn't actually that hard. Like I just reached out to those prisoners' families and I communicated with them and I treated them with respect. And then I built a relationship with them and got sources and got media. But nobody else had done that.
Nobody even
For some
asked.
reason, nobody asked.
And asked in the right
People
way,
want to
probably.
know what's happening in prisons. It's not like there aren't tons and tons of reporters, tons and tons of investigators who would look at prisons every single year. For some reason, no one had called some of their parents and talked to them. For some reason, nobody had really sat down with any of the activists who helped them, any of the public defenders who were on some of their cases. It wasn't that hard. But, you know, I just sitting for a bit and thinking about like kind of creative ways to get in on a story or get in on a historical event, I think has helped me make some of the leaps that I've made. Like often people are kind of like, you know, like you were saying, like, okay, you're 23. Do you feel like you've accomplished? Like, do you have any more goals? I'm like,
done.
Are you done? No, I'm not. But I get why people ask me that, and I try to answer it by sort of explaining that I think maybe it's definitely a mix of like hard work and finding some of these cool stories, and then luck, like just happening to be at Mike at a time when they needed someone like that.
Absolutely.
And happening to be at Vice when a show was starting where they were going to let me go run and gun it. And so I think that sort of same spirit has followed me the entire way through. I guess literally since I was little, being like, I'm going to come up with a cool story, to then being in college, being like, okay, I can retell what everyone thinks they know about mass incarceration. I'm going to tell them they're wrong because they missed this huge element of it. Or, you know, I remember working on a story with Liz Plank about the female orgasm and like how people, you know, just totally don't understand female sexuality. And the whole point of the piece was like, it's not that hard. And
everybody's like, it's a maze.
Right. It's like this, I mean, people market to it like products and stuff as though like it is like some mysterious goddess you will never be, like, you know, like some weird thing you have to like pray to unlock.
To conjure,
right. And you know, the whole point, like me and Liz were like joking about this in the office. A bunch of women were joking about this in the office, and we were like, let's do a piece about that. So just kind of being able to take weird things that most people would be like, I'm not going to put a story about like female orgasm on like, I don't know, any other nightly news show or something. Like, let's like throw it out there and see what happens. And so I think that spirit followed me literally from, I guess, when I could walk to right now.
I think for me, and one of the reasons why I asked that question about do you feel like you're done? Because for a long time, making a feature-length documentary was the end-all be-all goal for me. It was like on my bucket list before I die to do this.
So now you're done and you're going to retire.
Yeah, and I'm done. And then, so then,
Nice.
I don't even know why I'm doing a podcast now. I should have just wrapped it up at that point. But then,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So then, at some point, you realize, and everybody tells you along the way, that it's the journey, it's the creating of the thing that's the fun part. But I think it takes going through it once or twice to actually internalize that, and to actually go through it, complete a project that you never thought you could do, and then take a look back and be like, oh yeah, like this isn't the fulfilling feeling that I thought that was going to be there at the end of the road. It was the actually making it, the good times on the road, like the challenges and the struggles that you went through, that was actually the fun part. But I think it does, like for a lot of people, especially if you're just getting started out, like you have to kind of go through that experience to really fully understand it and internalize it. So that was your thesis. Was you were a historian major in college?
Yeah, history and science, the department was called. So what you did is like a bit of history of science and then also science. So I took some physics classes, psych classes, and stuff like that.
Wow.
But really, I wanted to do the history.
I think that's a great example of a way in which people can transition. And I don't know anybody who's gone to college that is doing exactly what they set out to do once they were in college. Though obviously you're using elements of it and skills that you acquired from that.
That was kind of like, I remember my freshman year talking to my friends who were like, I'm going to be an econ major. Then I'm going to go work at Goldman Sachs. And I was like, okay,
Make
bro.
a buttload of money.
Yeah. I was like, okay, cool. Like, but I was like, I just want to love school. I mean, I always have really loved learning. I love reading. I don't find being in a classroom painful. I don't find writing essays painful. I know that it is painful for some people, but not for me. And so I was like, this is maybe the last 4 years of my life where I can just dive into books I actually want to read, work on projects I want to read, suck up to professors who do things that I think are interesting. This might be literally the last 4 years of my life that I can do that. So I'm going to study what I want to study, and I'll figure out the job part after.
Yeah. So you thoroughly enjoyed your college experience. Where'd you go?
I did. I went to Harvard, and I should say, everybody who goes to Harvard has a love-hate relationship with Harvard because, it is, like, I've never been around so many brilliant and, like, weird and interesting people. I've never had so many resources around me. Harvard has so many resources. They can let you study and do so much. I mean, literally, like, they have a program where, like, if you decide you want to learn a language, they have to hire someone to teach you that language. You can find a language in a dark corner that no one's really speaking anymore, and they literally have to they've like promised students that they'll find somebody to teach it to you. And every year there's like that kid who just wants to see if like Harvard will really do it, so that but that's like the culture there. And so you love the school, and if you love learning, there is no greater place to be, but it's also a competitive place. It can be isolating. There were semesters where I was sad or like frustrated a lot, or that they don't have a great social life for students there. I mean, like, you probably heard the jokes about like how like Harvard kids have no social life. Like it's kind of true. The school doesn't invest a ton in social spaces and in lighter extracurriculars for the students there. And so I think if you're not careful, it can be a place that like sucks you in. And so I wouldn't say it's perfect for everyone. It did turn out to be a great experience for me. I would never change where I went to school, but it's not like Hogwarts and like this like journey of like, I don't know, like it's not, I think some people think it's like that, where
now,
like,
right?
There are bad people at Harvard. There are rude people at Harvard. There are mean people. And there's like, there's a culture in place that can mean that if you don't seek really good friends, you don't find things that you really love and are interested in, like you could end up in a bad place. And so I think almost any Harvard student you spoke to, unless they're like crazy, they would tell you they have a love-hate relationship with it, because there's just no other way to relate to that school. It's such a weird place.
So you're doing history and science, but then you also start to get some internships in TV and film type world. So what was the first one?
My first internship was actually at a PR firm. And I remember at the end of my freshman year, I looked around and there really were no jobs. And I don't come from a family where like my parents were going to give me thousands of dollars to just do I want to for the summer? Like I needed to find somebody who would give
you gotta
me
work.
some money.
Yeah.
So I reached out to this PR firm. They had a thing up for interns, but they only wanted people who were going to graduate soon. I was like, so I'm really not going to graduate soon, but I work really hard. I see you have these clients. I know some stuff about that because of what I was studying. Like they had like Raytheon was a client of theirs for a while, so I could do stuff related to science for them. And I was like, I will just like tweet for them. I will write things for them. I'll do like whatever you want me to do. I will bring you coffee. Like, can I work for you, please? And they let me come in. They told me like when I went into the office, they were like, we really don't hire people your age. So like we're letting you come and like take a peek around, but like you're probably not gonna get the job. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm still gonna like try really hard. So I just like introduced myself to everyone in the office, tried to get to know what they do, try to see like intersections with what they do with like what I could possibly offer them as a, I don't know, 18, 19-year-old at the time. And it worked out. Like they called me a couple days later and were like, actually, like you can intern for us and we'll pay you like $10 an hour.
That's great.
So I was so excited. But that's kind of how it then ended up working out for like the rest of my career now. I like every job or internship I got, like there was no sign up, there was no online posting for it. I just kind of harassed someone until they were willing to give me an opportunity. So the next summer, I joined Starfish Media Group, which is a production company based in Chelsea, and kind of worked across a million things from like little projects for CNN docs to like, I don't know, almost sort of like marketing type materials for the production house itself to like little things for HBO Real Sports. I was like a little bit all over the place, but it was again a situation where I'd like kind of begged to just come on and like be that person who you can call at 9 p.m. and send somewhere to go do something, and like I'll do it if you just give me a couple dollars. Yeah. So I did that. Then I worked at NBC the summer before senior year. And that was a little bit more of like a traditional and like frankly a little bit of stuffy experience of like being in an office wearing a little bit like a suit every single day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like in little kitten heels and slacks and stuff. And,
wow.
Then, was like, okay, I learned a lot there, but I think probably the right place for me to be when I graduate is somewhere that's like up and coming, doesn't have so many rules. I'm going to have a little bit of a steeper learning curve. People will actually include me in meetings and let me be a fly on the wall. And that's then how I went to Mike. But
and Mike, was there a job posting?
No.
There's no job? Really? No way.
I also bothered somebody there. Yeah, Billy didn't put up, he wasn't looking for an intern.
Yeah.
I emailed someone at the company who I knew and a little bit at the time. Like they weren't not even my friend. And I was like, hey, I've worked on these things. I went to Harvard. Like, give me a shot, you know? And Billy brought me in for an interview, and I actually showed up to that interview in a black suit because I had no idea what I should wear because I'd just been at NBC.
Well, that's the thing, right? You always dress up.
Right, I did it. I went
and Mike.com.
I remember once I then got the job, like Billy, Regina DeLay, who's like head of video at Genius now, but was working with Billy at the time. Like they were like shitting on me. They were like, it was the funniest thing when you came through the door in a black suit for this interview because like they were. I think Regina was wearing like Air Force Ones and like these like billowy, like basically pajama pants. And Billy was like in he like the same t-shirt he wears every single day. So like, I looked like a fish out of water. Sort of was a fish out of water. But again, I kind of just like pled with them and like made my case, and then they hired me.
That's amazing. Yeah. And because my assumption was that going into this, you would have had some of that production experience because Mike.com is it was a small team, and I don't know how big their team is now, but it started out with like 2-3 people.
I was the fourth person.
You were the fourth person. Yeah. And then it's kind of like everybody has to have a role in terms of like, they're trying to hire people that are unicorns that can kind of do everything. Yeah. So what did you bring to the table right away? And since you didn't have a lot of the hands-on production experience, if I'm right, you had to learn it.
A PA intern at all these places, so I hadn't. I'd been shooting for them. I wasn't going to shoot something for HBO Real Sports. Like they didn't let me touch anything of any importance. But what I did was I brought Billy, Regina, and and it was Sam Thonis who was on the team at the time too. And I think he's now at the Outline. Was at Bloomberg after.
Right. And also this seems like a very small world. Is that you're even talking about CNN docs and like I think Billy recommended me somebody over there, and it's like wow,
it's such a small world. Yeah. But yeah, it was literally those 3 people, and I brought them stories. So like what I had was my stories. So I had ideas, I had sources, I had places I wanted to go, I had like real things that someone could execute on, go out in the field and do. And so yeah, I wasn't going to be like the greatest shooter of all time. I hadn't done a ton of field producing, so I think that's probably why they were looking at me skeptically at first. But I think then I just sold them on the ideas that I had, and I think they saw that, at least at first, I was sort of, again, like this intern figure who set up a ton of stories that they launched and went out on. And for that reason alone, I think they thought that was valuable. That like,
absolutely.
I could just...
That's like, I think probably the hardest thing to do is to find the stories and do the research and also communicate it properly with the people that you're speaking with.
Right. And I had saved them time because I'd done the pre-production on it. Like I'd actually made some calls. That
probably like blew them away. They're like, holy shit.
I hope. I think maybe.
Yeah.
But I knew myself. I was like, okay, I don't have that much to offer to this team that clearly needs people to wear a lot of hats. So like, what do I have? Okay, I have the ability to contact these people, and I have cool ideas. Like, let me see if I can, like, sell them on my my brain. That was really it. So yeah, I tricked them into hiring me.
Nice.
And yeah, the rest is history.
It's all about the balance between relationships, your health, your wealth, your personal well-being and work, and all. There's so many different levers that you're constantly tweaking and pushing because they're constantly out of balance. Like, I don't think I've ever been a point in my life where I'm like financially stable and healthy and relationships are perfect. Like everything's perfect. Yeah. There's kind of, you always have to be tweaking and reassessing.
Yeah. I mean, people always have that. They show you that triangle that's like you're working really hard or getting good grades if there's a student, you have a social life and you're working out, and you can only have 2 of 3. Like you're taking care of yourself physically, you're doing really well at your job or school, or you have friends. I don't think you really have to choose just 2 or 3. Like I'd say I've like gotten okay at it. Like I'm boxing regularly. Like I have a crazy job where I'm traveling right now. Sometimes I'm gone more than half of a month. So New York is almost like my apartment's like my hotel room that I stay in when I'm in New York. It doesn't always feel like home because I'm gone so much. But I've learned to teach myself, like taught myself how to like just force myself to catch up with those people, force myself to go out, build time, whether it means like I'm going to get up an hour earlier to just like do a little bit of yoga in this hotel room. Like you just have to be kind of disciplined. Like making a balanced life, it requires some discipline, I think. Like it doesn't, there's no point at which you wake up and you're naturally like, you've figured it all out. Like I am a successful businesswoman and I'm super fit.
Everything
and I have
is easy now.
a million friends and I'm rich. Like no, they don't wake up and that happens to you.
Yeah.
Like success requires some level of discipline, and it doesn't mean being like a type A, anal, insufferable person. But I think it does mean waking up and being like, all right, like I won't feel good about myself if today I don't make 30 minutes to have lunch with that friend who I can escape the office with and catch up with a little bit today. Like maybe it'll be a little tight on that project I'm trying to do, but like for my own like mental health, just like when I get home and feel good about myself, like I need to do that. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to like sneak away to that workout class. I have left Vice in the middle of the day and like gone and worked out and come back because that's what I need to do.
It's probably more important to do that, and you'll be more productive by doing it. Do you find that in terms of your health and eating healthy and exercising, I find it to be very challenging on the road. And I just did recently. I've been traveling a lot lately, probably not as much as you, but I did. It was a week. It was actually only like a 3 or 4 day shoot between Portland and Seattle. And I was like, experiment. I'm going to eat healthy every single day. I'm going to exercise at least once a day. And then I did it and I felt better doing it. But then I just was in California for 10 days and I didn't do any of that. I ate terrible. I had like hamburgers, cheeseburgers, like all this disgusting food, and I didn't work out. And so it's a challenge to keep those habits up when you're on the road.
Yeah.
Is that something you generally keep up?
I try. Like I'm decent about being like, okay, I might, like last week I was in middle of nowhere, Southern Illinois. It was 100 degrees every single day, and I was staying in a motel, and it didn't have a gym. Surprise. The local grocery store was a dollar store, so I was eating sort of TV dinners every single night.
Wow.
But you know, I would just do little things like, okay, I'm going to circle around this motel, like, I don't know, a million times. Just be like, I did like a power walk. I'm going to do some push-ups in my room. I'm going to do whatever I can to just feel like a little better. But yeah, there are elements of it that you don't have control over. Like, I can't help that for a 10-mile radius, everything is fried, you know. Some of that I can't control. But I do try to, like, I know that I'll feel better if I just take a small act every day to take like a tiny bit of control of my situation. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a bougie Equinox experience.
God love that Equinox.
Gotta love that Equinox. Gotta love how Williamsburg is like Whole Foods Equinox Apple store now.
Yo, that's where I am. I'm at the WeWork, so I go to Whole Foods every day. I go to the Equinox, and it's like.
So you're like
I'm
that
part
person.
of the problem. I am part of that problem. Yeah, but I also love it. Like I'm not the one that's like complaining about gentrification, even though I am the biggest part of it.
Right.
I'm like, let's embrace it.
The second you like put on that Kiehl's lotion at Equinox, you're like, now I get it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I'm being hugged by my mother.
Right. And so, you know.
No, but you know what's the worst about that block is the fact that like 10 people every day will ask me if I want to sign up for their program. And it's like, what do you say? Like, I got to a point where it's being mean. And then I was like, wait, Matt, don't let this happen.
It's so, I talk about this actually all the time with people I work with, because we'll like walk by there and get lunch or whatever. Yeah. And someone will shout at you and be like, do you care about gay rights? And I'll be like, I do. I report on it. I don't want to sign your petition. Yeah. And you like then feel awful. Like, but I do, and I should stand up for it.
I told someone I didn't care about kids. They said, do you care about kids? And I was like, no, I don't. And they're like, great, so you want to sign up for this.
Right. And then you kind of feel dirty after. Yeah. But like, also they ambushed you.
It's not fair.
It's not fair. Yeah. I don't know. I get it though. Like they're there hustling. That's their job. Like they need to hustle me. Like I'm down for that. Like you know, I could see a scenario in which like I'm that person, but like
I've come back. And now I'll do a smile and a no thank you. Yeah. And I do it early enough that they know. Like, they have to know that there's just regular people every day. I have a system
I put in my headphones because I know the block radius where that happens. Yeah. And so I, like, put in my headphones and I'll be, like jamming, like, just see me, like, so distracted and, like, whatever my new favorite song is that, like, they feel uncomfortable approaching me.
You know what I'll do as well is I'll find people blockers. And I'll just, like, hide behind somebody as we go up.
Yeah.
And then
it's easy as a woman to do that. A woman who's also barely over 5 feet.
Yeah. You can just, like, sneak around.
Leave. Yeah.
Oh, man. The challenges of modern life in Williamsburg.
Yeah.
So... Where were we?
We were talking about health and taking care of yourself while you're throwing yourself into stories.
Yeah, you know what? I give myself a little bit of credit sometimes where I know that sometimes if I go away for 10 days, I may not work out, exercise, but that's okay. I'm just going to give myself that break and say when I come back, I'll get back into the routine. Because I find myself growing up... Maybe this is my Catholic upbringing, but just so much guilt. Like, I just feel guilty about everything.
My mom is a Cuban Catholic.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I am confirmed. I taught CCD for 3 years.
You taught CCD?
I taught CCD.
Wow, that's next level.
Yeah, it was next level.
I didn't. I was a part of CCD, but I didn't teach.
I did it. I taught it.
Church
I've
every
read
week.
that thing to front back.
Oh my God.
You know, when I'm home, still church every Sunday.
So can you talk about religion at work and then obviously politics is such a big part of it. Most people at the office, they can't talk about this stuff, but you have to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, my job requires so many difficult conversations. Like I will 1 hour be talking about a sex trafficking victim. The next hour be talking about the way somebody's personal politics is influenced like a bill that they've introduced. And so, being a reporter is having uncomfortable conversations all the time in a way that's weird in most professions. Like you don't go to, I don't know, if you work in, I don't know, finance or global or health or something, healthcare. You don't show up to the office and like announce how you feel about an abortion bill. It's inappropriate to talk about Donald Trump all day, but that is my job. I am trying to think thoughtfully about those things all the time. And you know what's been tough about it, especially the past couple months, sort of since this election and with sort of the political climate right now, it's been like I leave work and I go and I meet my friends for drinks or go out to dinner or something. And my friends have had like a pretty fun regular day at work, talking about light things, working on their projects, and like now they're joking about stuff. And I've spent the whole day thinking about something like maybe really disturbing, frankly, or really sad or some like horrifically racist event or something. And it's really hard for me to turn off. It's hard for me to like go and then like laugh about Kim Kardashian after I've like come back from a shoot where the shoot I was just on in Illinois, spent 5 days in a community where sort of a group of white, mostly men, had embezzled money out of a public housing fund that was supposed to serve mostly poor and black people, and spent a week with these people who are now being evicted from the homes because they're in such bad shape they can't live in them. And like just sort of seeing like how terribly those people have been treated coming home from that, and then like meeting my friends to go out that like Thursday evening, it feels really weird. And that's something about my job. That's one of the hardest things about my job that I haven't figured out yet, is like how I can separate how my job makes me feel, and not let it bleed into everything else in my life. Like not be that person who shows up to parties and is like, you shouldn't be laughing because today in DC, like, you know, I don't want to be that insufferable douche. So like I'm trying, and then, but in my head it's there. Yeah. And so that's really been something. And then of course, you know, like I'm also a female reporter. I'm a person of color. And so there's like this tension of like trying to take myself and my own experiences out of what I'm reporting on and to be neutral. There is the tension of trying to not, you know, what I've learned then while I'm reporting and am naturally as a human being going to be affected by it, not letting it then bleed into other people. But it's a lot. And you feel like, I wish there were more people doing stuff like this that I could turn to and talk to, and they wouldn't find it weird.
Are you allowed to put your personal spin on it? And not spin, but your own personal touch to it?
Well,
or
no,
like,
I mean,
does your personal
the job
opinion
does require like trying to be, I mean, no human is perfectly objective all the time. So, you know, nobody's crazy enough to think that you're going to be like that 24/7. And in the office, like, I know who most of my colleagues voted for. I know like what they think about certain social issues or whatever. We talk about those things. We're allowed to be human in the office. We all go crazy if we couldn't be. But you are in your work, any single project you're on, you have to try to take yourself out of it because it's not about you. And you know, when you are an on-camera reporter, you have to be extra careful about that. It's really not about you. You're not trying to make people pay attention to you in this story. Like you're a conduit through which other people feel they're at this story, they're in this location. And so you have to think about yourself as that and not as the story.
Was there ever a time that you did a story that changed your personal views?
Yeah, all the time. I've never, again, I think like the quote you were saying before, like if you go out on a story and you leave and you're like, that is everything I thought it was going to be. Those people are all bad or good in the ways that I thought they were going to be. You did that story wrong. Nobody is black and white. No story has a single villain. I haven't yet done a story where there's like really one person who orchestrated everything that went wrong. It's not like that. It's not like a Disney film. Life isn't like that. So I think that, you know, it's like a constant reminder to pull yourself back from those situations, which is some of, you know, like I was saying before, like why you try to disarm people, why you try to remind them that you're human, because you are also reminding yourself then that like this is not a canvas on which like I am painting a story. I am like foraging, I am hunting for like what the best version of events that I can kind of recover and tell here. And that's the spirit at which I come. Like I'm not the creator of this like of the story. I'm not the person who like I don't own this, but I am the person who's like here and trying to discover it, and through that helping other people discover it. And that part of that is constantly like literally in your head saying things like you like reminding yourself to be neutral, reminding yourself that like, you know, you sometimes like when you, especially on the campaign trail, a few other stories that I've done, like people have shouted racist things at me. Actually, when I was at Mike, I did a story with Billy wasn't on this shoot, but two other DPs that we were working with, and a man off screen called me a colored person, which is like not a term you're supposed to use anymore.
No.
And I was just like so hurt and jarred by that, but like I had a job to do and I couldn't like, I'm not gonna, you have to make choose your battles. You have to decide like this isn't like a fight I'm gonna have right here, right now. I also need to understand maybe that person is living in an area of the country where conversations around like the right way to talk to people, the right way to approach people of color, he probably doesn't get to have those too often. So like, let me step back from like the liberal rage of like New York, where if someone said that to me on the subway, probably 10 people would stand up.
You wouldn't have to say anything.
You, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but like, and now I'm in a place where like, okay, let me think about like thoughtfully how to manage this situation. And so I have to, again, remind myself like this, I'm here and it's not about me and it's not about like how I'm feeling. I just need to like do my work. But then at the end of the day, like you do remember who you are. You do feel some type of way about things that you've seen or that happened to you or what maybe those things mean for you. And it's hard. And I don't have like an answer for it yet. That's one of the things I talk to my mentors about all the time is like, how do you deal when someone says something sexist or racist around you, but you have like a reporting job to do and you don't want people to like, I don't want to ever be like that black female reporter. I want people to recognize me for my work, not like who I am or what my work means because of who I am. I just want my work to be really good. Not that who I am doesn't play a huge value in and doesn't affect the stories I find, because it definitely does. I mean, if you just look at the stories I tell, you can't help but see like a little bit of my sort of personal and cultural influence in it. But at the same time, again, it's like I'm not trying to overlay that on top of my work. So I'm always asking mentors, friends in the office, like how did you deal with that situation, or when you came home, like how did you decompress? And I haven't yet found a good answer.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
I don't know if you ever will. That might be
why a study came out the other week about how like journalists drink more than most people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think that might be why, because they just like are thinking about things and not compartmentalizing.
Yeah, and not taking a break from it. And
should be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I imagine it's always from one story to the next. And at Vice, I imagine you don't do a lot of fluff pieces. You're not doing stuff that's just like, and now the lighter side of, life.
Yeah, I mean, we try to do fun stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done quirky stories. So I did this story about the band, the HBCU, or Historically Black College, that performed at Trump's inauguration and the controversy around them. And it was...
Oh, I think I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a low-stakes story in that it's not a life or death story. Like, nobody was going to be harmed physically for what happened. But, of course, there was this huge uproar. A ton of other... Black universities and groups, organizations, reached out to that school and were like, what the hell are you doing? Like, how could you go perform at this guy's inauguration? Like, you're embarrassing us. Like, represent your people, whatever, those kinds of things. And these students were like, I've never been to DC.
They were stoked, right?
They were stoked.
Yeah.
They were like, look, I don't like Trump that much, but like, I've never been to Washington, DC.
Yeah.
My parents have never let me travel. Like, I need to go. I need to do this. It's not about like me trying to represent all black people in the US. Like, can I just represent me for an afternoon and go do my performance? And that was a lighter story, and a story that I had a lot of fun with, because I was just like on a college campus, like watching these girls who were like amazing dancers, like get ready for a performance. This was the biggest stage they were going to be on. They didn't care. They would have danced for whoever.
Yeah.
They just were like so excited to have that opportunity. And like seeing them smile and like giggle and whisper together and like kind of freak out was so cool. Seeing them like sew diamonds onto their little outfits on their own with like their own money, well, that was a lot of fun. And so I do get to do stories where I'm like, oh, I'm on college campus again. I'm like, I'm like kind of a kid. Like, I'm laughing with these kids.
Yeah.
I'm not taking myself too seriously. I'm not here to be like, and why did you decide?
Yeah.
I am going to ask them tough questions to like make them reflect a little bit, but like I'm not here to like nail them to a wall. They're 19. So I do get to do that. And Vice is just, especially the nightly show, is really trying to infuse more of that spirit. But yeah, so much of what we do is like, because undercovered stories are usually the stories that are hard to tell because they're dark, because something awful is happening, because a lot of people are turning away from it. And Vice has tried to make a name for itself on chasing those stories. So yeah, there are sometimes where you watch episodes and you're like, I'm not crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are days where I walk by our control room and I'm like, and I have to walk away
like,
because just like what the images on the screen are just... I've dealt with enough today. I can't look at that also. Like, I need to extract myself from the situation. So, yeah, it can be a lot.
It's going to be a continual balance, I imagine. I don't know if this is the right quote, but it's something about strong opinions or strong convictions held loosely, which I think that more and more, that's how I feel, especially with like political views or anything like that, where I'm like, listen, I'm coming into this with a bias. Like any conversation, my dad voted for Trump, so to have a conversation, so to have a conversation with my dad, although I would say he's not very extreme on the right wing side. Like, he left a voice message. I don't know if I still have it, but he's like, Matt, they're all assholes. I don't give a shit. They're all assholes. And I'm like, yep, Dad, they're all assholes.
Not wrong.
He's not wrong. Yeah. So, but then to go into a conversation with him or anybody else and to not already have all these judgments and ideas. And I think what helps too is if you're talking about policy, most people have no idea, and I'm not even good with policy.
Yeah.
But if you're like, all right, so what are the policies that you don't like, or that you don't like about Hillary or Trump or anything like
Right.
that, and it kind of changes the
The
conversation.
Daily Show does that so well. I mean, they send those correspondents out, and they're like, "So, what's the difference between the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare?" And people are like, "Well, Obamacare sucks because of this, but I like the Affordable Care Act for these
Everybody's
reasons."
got an opinion.
Right. Everyone has an opinion. They don't totally know all the reasons why they have that opinion or
Yeah.
the facts required to like get there to form it properly. But Americans definitely have a lot of feelings right now.
They do.
And I mean, one of the like major, I have a lot of friends. I have a sister who's a teacher. Both my parents are professors. One of my best friends is a teacher in Brownsville, here in Brooklyn. And one of the things I just talk to them all the time is like, wow, that we're really in an education crisis in the U.S. Like a critical thinking and sort of, people, I don't know if it's that they are reading and aren't necessarily like comprehending everything, but it does feel like what we've learned, and I don't just mean from this election cycle, but just in general over the past couple of years, like people seem to have a lot of opinions, but not entirely understand actually how they got to them, and be willing to do some of the investigative work to figure out, like what do they really believe? Like who should they actually throw their weight and their support behind? And I think, just like early education plays a huge role in like later shaping our electorate. And so, I think there are a lot of people right now in those spaces thinking about like, oh shit, like what can we do to bring politics into the classroom, to bring like policy literacy, like the ability for young people to like understand and digest what any like healthcare bill means, break it down for them in a way that's digestible for young people, but just start getting them like comfortable with those issues, so that when they're in their 20s, it's not like a thing they're afraid of and want to like shirk away from, and probably just are going to go with what their parents decided to do. Like, how can we get them more actively engaged?
The audience that listens to this show or watches it probably has seen minimalism, and they're fans of simple living.
Yeah.
And even in the documentary, we interviewed with a lot of people who they just cut out all media, and they're just not interested in it. And there's people like Tim Ferriss who say that they do not watch politics, they're not interested in it, they don't watch any forms of media, but they will go out and they will vote, but they'll go out and ask a few of their friends who share similar views or who are in tune and say, hey, who do you think would be the best person to vote for?
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you have advice for people who are like that, who are just happier without media journalism?
It's tough because I'm a little biased. I obviously want them to care about journalism. Mm-hmm. My livelihood depends on people caring about journalism, hopefully, but I do get it. Like, if you even just have one of these, like the AP app downloaded, you're getting push notifications all day long that can really like screw up your psyche. That can make you panicked about things that maybe aren't like materializing as fast as the push notifications make them seem like they are. And it's a lot that can weigh down on people every day. And I get why people like react to that by being like, no, I'm deleting. I need to detox from technology and social media right now. I don't want to be on Twitter. I don't need to see Trump's tweets, whatever. I get it. And so I don't really judge people for that. I think there are a lot of people who have been angry the last few months at people who didn't read or didn't do their own research or just called their friends and asked who to vote for. I think there are people who are angry at them, who are kind of like, screw you, you voted for the wrong person, or screw you, you didn't care enough, or you thought you didn't need to go to the polls, or whatever, because you wanted to be in your little like fish tank, being comfortable in your environment. I don't feel as viscerally mad at those people because I understand how personally like harmful and upsetting some of the news can be. Because like I sometimes can barely like deal with my own stories. But I mean, I of course would say that like even if it's just picking one way in which you consume it. Like, you want to be that guy who still gets the paper every day and you like highlight little things you like, don't like, or want to come circle back to. Like, figure out a way to understand what's going on. Like, I mean, it's so cliche or it feels obvious to say, but like, knowing what's happening and having people who are doing a good job of uncovering what's happening in your country and the world around you is crucial to your democracy. Like, you can't have a functioning democracy if people do not have information available to them, if they're not holding the people in power accountable, if they're not showing up to vote, if they're not showing up to town halls and asking questions and pushing the people who represent them to better represent them. Yeah, it can be a lot. And you do not need to be on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You do not need to follow all of your representatives. You don't need to be like sucking in that information all the time. But I am afraid of a world in which like everyone is so oversaturated with the exhausting news cycle that they pull back instead of fight harder. And that will only make the world a scarier place, I think. And so it's a tough thing to answer because I obviously am like deep in it. So I'm biased because it's my job. So I'm like, read it all. You better read the New York Times, Fox News, Washington Post, everything.
It is a funny balance
day.
though, right?
Yeah.
That there is so much now, like you said, it's so oversaturated that people feel like that's it, I'm just going to drop everything. And that's where a lot of the minimalism movement comes in, is especially with consumption, is that people are buying and have more stuff than they ever had before. The average house, there's 300,000 items in America. Right. And it's like, at some point people are like, no, I don't want any of it. But I completely see where you're coming from. And I'm somebody who has gone on the detoxes before and now is lightly mediated, and I do find my sources on things. But the one challenge that I've found, and especially see with other people, is that when it is coming from Twitter, Facebook, and all these other social sources, they are so biased. And people are like, oh, I talked to somebody who said... I mean,
some of it's fake. Like, some of it is legitimately fake.
But then some people will say, oh, Twitter I find is a really great source for me to get like unbiased information. And I'm like, but like everybody you follow, you chose to follow, and they probably have the same leaning views as you.
You built your echo chamber around
exactly,
you.
Which is like, that to me is scary. So how do you have an unbiased influence? And like, so if I'm going out and obviously you could get into the specific sources that are reliable, but is it going to CNN and Fox News and Vice, and like, is it having a mix of them, or what's the best way?
I would say a mix of them. Obviously Vice News is great. You should watch and read Vice News. But I read Breitbart almost every day too. Yeah. Because even if it's a source that you think is gonna, like, it's almost like hate reading for you, like maybe it just so represents like a perspective you don't want anything to do with, you should probably at least take a peek at it sometimes, because it'll make things that happen clearer to you, because there is a whole part of the country that doesn't think anything like you, and you should value that and not want to just shut those people out. You should try to read the sources that they turn to. I mean, honestly, sometimes I click on things on Facebook that I know are fake, just to be like, oh, this person that I went to high school with, like I actually respected or I took classes with, like, oh, they just shared this article. I see on that source, it's like not a real news organization, but like, let me read this so I can understand, like, how did they get there? How did they find this source? Why do they trust it? And I read it and I'm like, oh God. And it just sort of jolts me back into remembering how important sort of the work that we're doing right now is because there is such like sort of a literacy problem, and there people are having trouble distinguishing between the news. So I think, like, honestly, the major traditional, there's a lot of things that like cable news and some of those places are doing wrong. And no news organization is perfect. Nobody gets every single story precisely correct. But there are the classic sources that are really reliable. The New York Times, you should read the New York Times front page every single day, or at least several times a week. Or you should sign up. They have a newsletter, sort of their like Monday updates or weekly updates and stuff like that. You should just, like, at the very least, like, glance at that every single day. Sign up for some kind of newsletter that's going to send you a couple things to read every day from a couple different sources. If you're not somebody who wants to be like thrown via Twitter 50 article links all day long of like things for you to rage read, like like watch a nightly news show. Doesn't have to be Vice News Tonight, although we are the best, but you should watch a nightly news show. Like spend 30 minutes just like getting a little taste of what's going on, because something will probably spark your interest, and then you'll go find out a little bit more about it. But I really think that like a world in which people have like turned off from each other, and right now social media is the medium. It is the medium through which you can find out usually find out about what's happening on a corner across the country from you. Like if you turn it off completely, I think you're doing yourself and you're doing your country a little bit of a disservice. And so find ways to turn off. Like I have family in Cuba. When I go there, I can't even get on internet regularly. If I wanted to, I think I'd avoid it. Like I kind of enjoy being like, oop, airplane mode for a week.
Yeah.
Here I am. I'm really investing in my family. I'm doing my own thing. That's awesome. Then I come back and I catch up. So I think it's building out time. But like you have to stay engaged with your democracy. I don't know how else to put it. Like don't let yourself like become one of those people who's complacent and doesn't care.
What do you think are some of the biggest issues that you're going to be focusing on and that people should focus on over the next couple of years?
Over the next couple of years, I mean, there's so many. I mean, one of the things I think people should, in general, just sort of be watching is how the federal government is changing. I mean, the current administration, I mean, just in simple ways, like they literally are not hiring people who typically have jobs. We're seeing people decide and turn down opportunities in government that are usually pretty prestigious and you know, competitive and sought after. There's sort of a shrinking of the power there, of the control. And I think people should keep an eye on that, just in a general sense. Like when you hear that there are tons of roles open in an agency, it may sound to you at first like, oh, that's efficient. They've like cut costs or whatever. But maybe think about like what those people were, what those jobs were there for, and like what they were supposed to do. I mean, healthcare, people should be tuning in and trying to, and calling their representatives right now and trying to understand what's going on in that space. And I think we're likely to, no matter what happens, like there's going to be a major change in healthcare in the country right now. So pay attention to that. And if it affects you in ways that you don't like, speak up. Think about like the small ways in which every day you can engage on that, or you can donate to an organization that does something that in your opinion is positive in that space. You know, because things are changing rapidly. We are sort of in an unprecedented time. And so I think, you know, you don't, again, have to be on Twitter 24/7 watching, you know, everybody tweet and fight in their echo chambers all day long, but like, you know, engage.
I don't get very political on the show, but
yeah.
Not yet, not until today. Well,
I'm trying to keep my personal opinions out of it because again, that's my job.
Exactly.
But really, I mean, I have friends all across the political spectrum, and just everything I say to them is like, look, you don't have to be like deep in it, lost in the sauce like I am. Like, just care, though.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about? I've been following Dave Rubin, the Rubin Report. Do you know that show?
Yeah, I don't follow it regularly.
Yeah, so he talks a lot about the regressive left. I'm sure it's something that you've looked into, or at least I don't know if you've done any stories about it. How do you feel about that term and the direction the left is heading today?
You know, I think sometimes I wonder if those terms are like new only because the term is there and not because like those people weren't there before. You know, we are seeing some interesting stuff happening on the left in terms of there being a rising voice on that side that like really is demanding in some ways like kind of this like political purity. Like they really don't anymore have patience for progressive politicians who maybe are a tiny bit more center, or who don't check all the sort of classically left boxes anymore. I think that there's sort of an impatience. There, of course, are the people who, you know, are often sort of part of that Bernie Sanders crowd who I think like feel, you know, almost vindicated by what happened because not that they wanted necessarily in most cases to see Trump win, but that their election proves that the issues that they were talking about, the populist sentiment that they were feeling and trying to get more politicians to pay attention to, that like they were correct because of who they saw won, and now hoping to reshape the Democratic Party to pay much more attention to them. I I don't know though. I think like there are in every political aisle, there are people who twist facts. There are people who are maybe not so. They're like showmen, you know, like they're out there. They're like unwilling to hear anyone from any other side. They're showing up and they're causing problems in public spaces, not because they have like a real point that they want to debate with people, but because they're like there to fuck you. And like there are people on both sides of the aisle that do that. At the same time though, like, you know, when people are talking about sort of the campus, when they're talking about this on college campuses right now, and they're saying things like, oh, like, you know, these snowflake students, they can't hear Ann Coulter say anything without like, you know, crapping their pants or something. Like I think that is really I have a tough time with that because, you know, like free speech is you have the right to say whatever you want, but you also other people have the right to dole out consequences to you if they don't agree with your actions. Like people don't have to when people, you know, I think like around the PC conversation right now, people say like, you know, kids can't hear certain terms anymore without like freaking out, and or, you know, people are getting fired because they one time used a word that's not socially acceptable anymore. And I think people are seeing that as a sign that like we're becoming too sensitive or whatever it may be. But the truth is that like you have freedom of speech to say what you want, but everyone else has the freedom to decide that they do or do not want to associate with you because of who you are or how you made other people feel. And I think that there's some air of condescension. There's sort of this air of like wanting to excuse behavior that like is exclusionary, that is sometimes racist, that is sexist, and sort of hide behind the veil of free speech. And there's now sort of on both sides, people who are like provocative and trying to like sort of in a self-absorbed way, like make a name for themselves by kind of fabricating these situations in which those like two groups of people who like would very obviously like hate each other and not want to be in the same room together, you know, are like gonna come to a head and make headlines. And so like again, I don't necessarily think that like people who felt those ways didn't exist previously. Like and so I find terms like that sometimes interesting because I think they make it sound like certain populations exist now, but they didn't a few minutes ago,
right? Or like that you couldn't also say the regressive right. that
right.
There is two sides to that coin.
Right. I mean, I guess we now have the term alt-right.
Sure, which is essentially the same.
Right. So, you know, the term is there. But like, I mean, I've been on the internet my whole life. Like, there's nothing about the alt-right right now. Like, I didn't read when I logged in to play like City of Heroes hero games when I was little. Like, I literally had people like, you know, it wasn't Pepe memes, but like, you know, people were saying that sentiment was there. Like, there's nothing new about a lot of that. Like, yeah, they played a particular role in like, I guess the political stage this year that they haven't before, but like people like that have been here the whole time. Like they were on the right. There are equally disruptive people on the left. And I don't know that like, sometimes I'm like wary of using those terms just because like I think they give some people the impression that like there's like a whole new crop of people that like previously we'd never seen before. And I don't know that I believe that.
And I think the free speech is a really interesting and pretty relevant topic today. It's interesting because I will talk to people and they will say that they don't fully understand free speech. And a lot of people that I talk to think that saying like the N-word is illegal. And I'm like, it's not illegal. And like you can say
it, but I can fire you because I can't have a workplace where people say that.
Right. But as a company, you're also not forced to fire somebody because of that. There's the one exception, right? Which is if it's causing harm and danger, you can't say fire on an airplane. That's illegal. But I don't think people understand the implications and why it's important. Because free speech is more important in news media than anywhere else.
It's tough as a like now sort of stepping out of my job and just being who I am and not having been in college that long ago. Like as a Black woman, like I'm like not likely to want to enter a debate with someone who regularly uses the N-word, or like who literally thinks I'm not a human being. Like, if you think about that, I can understand why there are college students who react really viscerally to someone who has maybe a record of speaking about who they are. Like, literally thinking that like they should go to gay conversion therapy, or that like they are like just a lesser species of human. You know, I can see why people react viscerally to that, because when you are a minority, you literally spend your whole life having experiences that like make you feel like your humanity is like chipped away, or people are trying to chip it away. And you're in a space, you're in your college, you are there to learn. And, you know, learning doesn't mean not, of course, learning means like hearing opinions, or hearing about issues, or hearing about people and things happening that you've never thought of, or you don't necessarily agree with. But like, to be asked to like attend an event, or to sit through your graduation ceremony and be spoken, and I have to say that I empathize with some of that. Like, I was at Bethune-Cookman at the graduation ceremony, reporting there when Betsy DeVos was sort of like booed. I mean, it was like actually the craziest graduation I've ever seen in my life. Like, she was booed continually through the entire thing. Like, anytime someone dropped her name, President Trump's name, when she was trying to make her speech, people turned their backs on her. There were grandmothers like leaning over railings, being like, "Betsy DeVos, go home!" Like the entire time, because this historically black college so did not want this woman there sending their kids off into the world. Like, they just felt that was so inappropriate. And again, like, I get the argument, like, you know, she's part of the president's administration. She has a lot of power over the education space. People should want to have a dialogue with her, get people to the table. But I also totally understand how some of the students felt, which was like, yeah, like, we can get people to the table, but like, why on my graduation day? Like, why is my graduation day going to be me sitting there with somebody who's like making cuts to programs that affect me, who has made comments that were, for reasons accidental or otherwise, like disrespectful to the communities from which I come? Is it fair for my school to, on my graduation day, a day where like I am not required to like get into political arguments with people, like I'm actually here just celebrating what I've accomplished for the last 4 or whatever years, like, am I required to sit through and like feel disrespected by this person? I understand that too, and I can't say honestly that if I was a Bethune-Cookman graduate that I would necessarily have felt different. I don't know, but I get it. And so, but there were a lot of people who really react to that situation by being like, those snowflakes, like, they can't hear an opinion that's not theirs. Like, they should be so lucky to have someone from the president's administration like come and talk to them on their graduation day.
I feel like, yeah, it would be very easy to see both sides.
Yeah.
And what's so hard, I think, in the moment of something like that is that when you do, there is the, I don't want to call it like mob mentality, but like, two people can very easily have a conversation and it's totally fine. But then when you have a group of like 300 people together, it can very easily get out of hand, where like you will get lost in that crowd. Like maybe even if I shared, if I love Betsy DeVos and I was at that event, I might be screaming at her, telling her to get off the stage.
Right. And like, you do see that happening. Like, it begins with like one person yelling a little bit. And then like other people are like, yeah, like, she does
right.
suck,
Yeah.
you know? And then like, now the whole room is like freaking out and everyone's like looking left and right. And yeah, madness is contagious in that way. And I did talk to a lot of students, and they kind of went in and they were like, yeah, she's not my favorite person, but like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then like, I would look over, I would see them in the crowd, and they would be like, yeah. And I'd be like, a minute ago, you weren't that angry, you know?
Yeah.
So there is some of that. And so that's why I do get why people are like rolling their eyes at some of the stuff that happened. I get it. But I do think that when there is like sort of a knee-jerk reaction now to be like, oh, like this person like didn't get to speak at this event at this college, like those kids are snowflakes. Like, stop for a second and like just take a minute to try to understand, like, okay, what population are those students from? Like, what experiences they had, that speaker, what ways in which like made those students feel like they don't just like object to that person's like economic views or theories. Like, that person may make those kids feel literally subhuman. And I think...
so that there are certain people like the Milos that are obviously like provocateurs.
Right.
But I think there are some people that, like Ben Shapiro, I think he's been silenced as well. But people like him I listen to. He's an amazing example of somebody who like I would hate to have a debate with about like abortion or any issue that I have an opinion about. And I'm like, wait a minute, I think I might be wrong.
Right.
It's like, it's great to hear those people that are...
they're not all Milos.
Yeah.
And that is some of where the problem is and why I like kind of, I guess I don't know like where to draw a really sharp line. But, you know, I think that like sort of individual colleges need to, and it's not just a conversation that's happening at colleges, but for the sake of sort of what we're talking about now, like I think they need to figure out with their students, like how to communicate with the student body on like why they make decisions then to invite certain people. Like if Ann Coulter is going to come give a talk at Harvard University and there are people there who start to freak out about that, like the administrator should invite those kids to the table, talk about like what the value, like what has she been invited to talk about, what value does that maybe have to them, how might the kids be able to be involved in the conversation, to ask her questions, to maybe confront her on her record, you know, make it a dialogue so they're not maybe forced to be in a situation where somebody is talking at them and they're not having that opportunity for debate. I don't know, I think like I saw that with the Bethune-Cookman example, which was like, you know, Betsy DeVos is a powerful and really interesting person. Those kids didn't really, they had to sit there on their graduation day and listen to her speak. There wasn't an opportunity for most of them to ask her any questions, give them ideas, tell them what policy issues, you know, and so for them like, it's kind of like, well, at least when like a moderator comes for some like talk, like I have a Q&A section at the end. Like there's something I can like learn and
it's very, you're totally right. It is an interesting.
But I think that like, sometimes these colleges have like kind of like brought these people in who they knew were going to piss their students off, and for some reason have like walled the school community off from like having a say in that, and that's some of what I side eye in those situations is like, okay, you said it's for the students' benefit, but like did you like talk to them about how and why?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And if these colleges maybe approach it in a different way, just didn't put flyers out and say Ann Coulter next week. It's like saying
Ann Coulter in your face,
like
be in this
email out
auditorium.
Ann Coulter's coming. If anybody, obviously there's probably a lot of students who disagree with her values and principles. We're having a meeting to discuss how this event should go. Like that's actually starting the conversation. And what I like about Ben Shapiro's events is that he'll have these events at colleges, and then he'll do a talk, and then afterwards he'll open it up to a Q&A, and he starts the line and he says, only ask a question if you disagree with me at any point. And like that, he lets those people ask the question first because they tend to be the most interesting as well. And now you're actually having a conversation. He lets them speak back, and sometimes they have really productive conversations, albeit differences.
Right.
So I think that's probably, that's a good point to go into our rapid fire section.
Okay.
It's rapid questions, not rapid answers. I don't have the LED lights. I'm like, pew, pew, pew. I'm gonna get some music and sound effects and stuff. Actually, but first, before we get into that, I got one question for you. This is an ongoing part of the show. Question: do you know The Rock?
Do I know The Rock?
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Do I know him? Like, is he my friend?
Yeah, you like buds with him.
I wish.
No. Do you know anybody?
He seems really cool.
Yeah, he seems awesome. I want to have The Rock on the show. That's like my big stretch goal. Is I want The Rock to sit in that chair right there.
Okay. I'm good at convincing people to do things or like interview with me. So like I might be able to find someone who knows The Rock.
Yeah. Okay. So and from your perspective, having done so many interviews and going out, producing and finding the interviews, what do you think should be my strategy to get The Rock? Like, how do you get... So if
he's not like a regular schmegular person who you're just going to be like, hey, like... I want to know your thoughts on...
Yeah, maybe like I'll just get a membership at his gym, and then...
Yeah, do you know where... Does he live in
I think he's in
Blaisburg?
Florida. Just see him like, walking around with a fedora.
How should you get The Rock on the show? I feel like, you like join his gym.
Yeah.
Or like you find him on a beach in Miami or something. Like I feel like that's where The Rock
just bring some suntan lotion.
You like maybe like play like a game of like, I don't know, beach... football with him.
Oh my god!
Or something. And
no, this is genius. Like
you accidentally like hit him in the head with the like little beach football, and you're like, oh my god,
The
Rock, Dwayne.
Yeah, that's like,
bro. Like I have this podcast.
Yeah,
and,
I actually brought my microphones.
Yeah, like do you have an hour and 15 minutes? And, no, I think he's the type of person who like he just seems so like I he's a funny person. I just think he like everybody loves him.
Yeah.
Like even people who like don't really like his work or don't think he's like a great actor, like are still like he's awesome. You know?
Yeah, he's just like an amazing guy.
Want to be his friend.
Super humble.
Yeah, he loves
down
his
to earth.
kids so much. He just seems to have like so much passion for life.
Yeah.
And so I bet like the best way to get him on your show or get him to be your friend or get him to have dinner with you or something is just like figuring out where he hangs out.
Yeah.
Like showing up and like bringing him that like, I don't know, juice press he likes a lot and be like, dude. Or like playing a game with him. I don't know.
It's got to be personal. Some kind
has to be personal.
Well, you know what? I also don't want to be creepy. So I'm approaching this slow.
Oh, but he gets creeped on all the time.
Sure,
so if you
that's
just
true.
like keep it kind of chill, you're like so much better off.
Like creepy
than
is the new
90%
normal.
of it. Yeah, I mean, people probably just run up to him and like take selfies with him without his permission. Like I imagine
Yeah.
he's just being hounded anywhere that he goes. So if you even are just make it a tiny bit natural, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
He also seems non-judgmental.
What question should I ask The Rock?
You
What's the most
asked The
important?
Rock. I want to know. Do you know that photo of him from years ago?
Yeah, with the fanny pack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what were you doing? What were you doing with the
I think
fanny pack? What's in your fanny pack?
Yeah. Oh, what was in the
What's
fanny
in the
pack is an
fanny pack?
amazing question.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to write that down.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a journey. I'm going to try to...
What other questions people ask you to ask him?
Oh, this is the first time I've thought of that. I honestly only brought it up in the last episode. Was
This should be
the
a
Rock.
recurring,
And that's the thing is that I think the
segment.
audience, my audience of 200 people,
Yeah.
are gonna be the ones that get the Rock.
Yeah.
And so if you guys that are listening, this isn't live, but if you guys that are listening know the Rock, shoot me an email.
Hit up Matt.
Yeah, and then,
And like,
That would
let
be-
me
wouldn't that
know
be so
if you
exciting?
need help
yeah,
producing.
yo.
I don't know.
See, this is what I'm thinking is that
You
I
want me to come in and like do like a lightning round at the end? Like
Yeah.
I will so help you out for free.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Let me know.
This is what I'm thinking about doing because I'm getting like comedians and musicians. Like I should just pull all the talent of everybody that I interviewed to somehow maybe make a video that's
Yeah.
like Dear the Rock.
Yeah.
And then get him on the show.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with criticism?
Usually when I'm criticized, I think most people react to criticism, especially when it comes kind of out of nowhere. I think they have like a visceral, like, no, I'm not like that. I did it right. You're wrong. And I'm normal. Like I have that reaction too. But I actually have a little like notebook on my personal laptop where I keep notes that I've received from people, whether it's like, hey, that scene in your piece sucked, or like you did not execute properly on this, your pitch was not, like whatever it is, or if it's even in my personal life from my friends, like I failed a friend in some way. I actually like keep notes about those things. That probably sounds like a little psycho. And kind of read back and just make sure periodically, like, oh, like, you know, sometimes those situations repeat themselves. Like, did I react better the next time? Did I learn something from that fight that I had with a friend? You know, I actually had one with a friend that was connected to my work because I'd been gone for so long and hadn't frankly been good at keeping up with her. She'd been my roommate in college. We are still really close, but I'd failed her as a friend. Like I just didn't keep in touch. And I think I felt like my job was so crazy and my job was so unique that like she'll be fine when she sees me. Like she doesn't need me to call her. Like she's good. I'm the one who's like has a rough life right now. That's not true. And you know, I make little notes about the times that I've failed and fucked up on those things because I can go back and be like, okay, I've repaired this one. I got that criticism. I fixed it. I repaired things with this person interpersonally, or I'm better at this at my job now. And I can kind of keep tabs on my growth in that way. But I do that for both literally like little fights I have with a sibling or big things that I need to improve on at work. It's so, you know, in like the short term, sometimes I have a reaction, like the immature reaction that a lot of people have, which is like, what? No, I've been busy and I didn't mean to do it, so you should not be mad, you know, like that kind of thing. But I always write it down because usually I look back later and I'm like, you know what? I could have done better, and here's how I'm going to do it.
How do you face doubt? We talked about that a lot, about how we go into a lot of scenarios where we have no idea what we're doing.
How do I face doubt?
Yeah, how do you face it going into those situations?
I have some songs. Like I have a playlist of songs that
Oh,
I
really?
play when I feel doubtful and afraid.
All right, let's go. We got to get a couple of these songs. I need to make a Spotify playlist right now.
No. Okay. So a lot of it is like Rick Ross.
Oh, yeah. I shared an elevator with Rick Ross once.
Really?
Yeah.
One time Rick Ross sweat on me.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, like a lot of sweat
How?
came down.
When?
I was at a charity event and he was the performer at it, and I like snuck up to the front of the stage and just kept yelling like Rick Ross.
Yeah.
And he kind of like leaned over and looked down, and like a big glob of sweat came through his beard.
Wow, there was a
fell
moment
on me.
there.
Yeah, there was a moment.
You're like, I'm keeping this sweat
Yeah,
forever.
and like he looked at me after
Oh,
he
really?
sweat at me. Yeah, it was the whole
That's
thing.
amazing. Yeah, I did a little
It's pretty
documentary with Meek Mill when he first got signed to Rick
Wow.
Ross's record label. It's funny because Meek Mill was one of he didn't want me filming him. It was a scenario where another company was paying me to be out there
Yeah.
to follow him around, and like I would show up at a radio station at 3:30, 4 a.m. And then he would just kind of shake his head. Like he's like, dude, I
not
don't
you."
even want you here. I don't want you here right now. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to be here either, but it's my job.
Yeah.
This is years ago. And
That's
then
funny.
I had him mic'd up, and then he went in to talk to the radio host, and he was just talking shit about me because I had the
Oh,
audio
people
on.
always
I was
do
like,
that.
Damn, man.
People always do that. That happens often on Vice shoots. They'll be like, "Oh, this reporter will not leave me alone." And you can hear everything that they're saying. You're like,
It's hilarious.
"Did you not see the Access Hollywood tape? Like, your mic is
Yeah.
always on."
That should happen with a politician in the UK.
Yeah.
He got in the car and drove away, and then it was one of those kind of. He was basically calling somebody that asked him a question like a simpleton, like
Yeah.
like a complete idiot. Who the hell made me do that interview?
If you got a mic on, assume someone's
Don't
listening
forget
to you.
it. All right, did we do the How to Face Out?
Oh, I was just going to tell you about Rick Ross songs
Oh,
that I listened
yeah,
to.
and then we went down a crazy.
I mean, I
rabbit
do
hole.
lame things like call my mom and my mentors and be like, "I'm afraid. What do I do?"
Yeah.
And then I listen to songs like John by Rick Ross and Lil Wayne, and then I'm like,
John
I
by
can
Rick
do it.
Ross. Yeah, anything is possible.
Yeah, anything is possible when you listen to Rick Ross. And sometimes I like do lame things like if I have some big interview that I'm nervous for, like I'll look at myself in the mirror and say some like prayer that I used to say back when I was at CCD all the time or
Oh, no.
whatever.
Yeah.
And just kind of like remind myself like, hey, even if I bomb this, like even if this is the worst interview in the history of interviews, like maybe I don't say anything at all. I just freeze up and I say nothing. I'll be actually fine. Like I'll come home and I'll still have lots of things and I'm gonna be okay. And I'll just like say something along those lines in the mirror and then go and figure it out.
What one skill or tool have you leveraged in a way that others haven't? Could be a skill or could be actual like a physical or digital tool.
I think I touched on this before, but I really think the one thing that I have that not everybody who does the work that I do executes well on is like I know how to take a story that maybe people don't empathize with, maybe they don't care enough about, make it visual and find a way to find characters that like bring it to life in a way that somebody who's far from that state, far from that prison, whatever it is, like is brought into their world and can start to understand. I've done that with the prison reporting I've done, the Chicago gun violence reporting that I've done, Gavin Grimm, whether it's LGBT rights, whatever. I think really carefully in every story that I do about how I'm going to make it really different from how everyone else is talking about the issue, how I can find media, people, and elements to bring into the piece. I mean, that's like sort of the luxury of doing visual journalism too, is that it's not just my writing. Like I can bring in so everything from the music to documents and graphics. I can work with illustrators. I have so many tools at my fingertips, and I can think about ways to just like blow that story out. And so I think I have been fortunate to also get to work with people too who think that way, and are really aggressive in storytelling in that way. And yeah, I think I just have like a little bit of a knack for it. Like it's not a digital tool. I'm not the best. I'm bad at Twitter actually. Like there are some digital tools I'm just bad at.
Yeah.
But I know how to find and execute on like good and surprising stories.
Right. I think that's the thing too, and it's you have to be genuinely interested and genuinely enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like there is a lot of drudgery that you're going to have to go through, and it's not always fun and exciting. But at the end of the day, you have to really like it.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same for you, right? You know, like there are parts of your job that are a job.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, once you like actually watch your finished product, a lot of the time you're like, that was just fun. Like for me, like that, like I feel so good.
Yeah.
Like I come home and I feel really good about what I've made and I've shared with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say someone's stuck. Somebody just graduated Harvard or another school, or they're setting out to do something different. Maybe they're not going to college. What advice would you give them to kind of pave their own way and make their own way?
Yeah. I mean, this is advice that I followed too, is I think like don't wait for that perfect job description to open up for you. Don't wait for that opportunity to knock on your door. Not that, you know, people aren't slaving away all the time to hunt for opportunities. Like keep doing that. But, you know, like fight to make the case for yourself. Like I literally got my jobs by going to people who weren't looking for me, hadn't put out a call looking for like an intern who'd come in and basically sell them stories. I like fought tooth and nail. I like reached out to people who barely knew me, who knew a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend or something. And I got 15 minutes and I tried to make my case. I think especially when you're coming out of, if you want to do something that's creative or, and you know, like storytelling isn't like finance and it's not secure in the ways that there are a lot of jobs that frankly like students are looking at right now. For a whole host of reasons I think you have to then like come into it with the attitude of like, I'm going to fight and often be like pitching and selling myself. Like I'm my own agent. I'm every day in any interaction I have with people, I'm kind of in those early stages. I'm fighting to kind of in casual and uncomfortable ways, like show my value. And I think it's not waiting for, again, that like perfect opportunity to come to you. It's like going to places where you think you might add value and talking to those people about how you can do it. Yeah, I think that's really the best way to break into a space where then you're going to be able to make a big impact.
Is there one Vice story or even Mike story that you worked on that you would recommend people watch? Like what would kind of give you the best feel for the kind of work that you do?
My favorite story I have ever done in anything ever is the piece I did on Trump and Chicago gangs for Vice News Tonight. I worked on that with producer Tracy Jarrett, who is also just one of my best friends. And it is an 11-minute mini doc that we convinced our bosses at Vice to air on the nightly show, which is only 30 minutes. So getting 11 minutes of the show was hard. But I don't want to give it away because I want you to go watch it. But it really represents everything that I'm trying to do with the work that I do, which is take what's happening on the political stage and a lot of the theater and antics that you see there, and look at how a lot of what you look at and you think is a joke that you want to turn off and you want to back away from, like, no, it has real consequences in some people's lives. And here is a community in Chicago. Here is a group of people who are literally dying, at risk of dying. And hear how the words, the sometimes faulty promises that are made in DC, in whatever political office, here's how those words actually have an impact then on the chances those people have at literal survival. And I went to Chicago several times. I spent time in DC for the piece, and I spent time in Cleveland. Our team worked really, really, really hard on that. I worked really hard on it. It's a story that I pitched and developed, and just like it personally means so much to me. And so I think if someone is interested in learning more about my style or like what I try to do, that piece alone can speak to like how hard I work and what I try to do and how I do what I do better than anything I can frankly articulate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know what episode that was on?
I forget the episode number. I can look that up, but all of our pieces are released online for free. That's an awesome thing we have at HBO. You can literally Google like Antonia Hilton, Trump, Chicago gangs, and it would come up on YouTube and probably Facebook video too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
On a similar sentiment, but I wanted to get that out of the way. Something that you had actually created, because I'm personally interested to see something that really connected with you. But I get every guest to give me and the audience one thing to watch, listen to, or read before they go to bed at night. And it doesn't have to be like short form, something they can finish, but something that they can start. So, so one thing to watch.
One thing to watch. I would watch, I think there's a couple, I think like right now people, and maybe it's just me, feel like a lot of the stuff they have to watch has to be like these big dramas or like serious news or whatever, and that there's not as much space for like comedy and just like not taking yourself so seriously. But one of the best things I've done recently is invest time in watching things like Master of None and Dear White People. I think both of those two shows are really, Dear White People not being as funny as Master of None. It's a sort of a dramedy, but I think those are two shows easily accessible. You should at least start and watch, because they kind of like, you're looking at characters of color, you're looking at people whose experiences aren't like the mainstream, but like kind of the issues that they're diving into are the casual relationships that they're like following and playing out in those two shows right now, I think are universal experiences. And so I think anyone listening to, watching the show would get something out of it, even if they don't finish the entire season. Like, try an episode. I think make time to watch something kind of clever, weird, and shorter form than a lot of the like big drama that dominates TV and dominates our news cycle right now.
Listen. One thing to listen to besides John by Rick Ross.
One thing to listen to. Shakira has a great new album out right now.
Oh, really?
I really like it.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that. I've been sleeping on it.
Or you don't even need to understand Spanish to appreciate it.
And read. Do you do much do you have time to read long form books with all the research
Not
and
as much as I
everything else
used
you
to,
do?
but I do read all the time. Actually, probably the best book I've read recently is, I might be pronouncing her name wrong, Yagyasi, but Homecoming. It's a sort of fictional historical telling about Homegoing by Yagyasi. Yeah, and I apologize to the author if I'm butchering her name. But it is a historically influenced fictional novel. And I read it a couple months ago, so it's not like I'm working through it right now, but it is probably my favorite thing I've read in the past year. And it touches on the African diaspora and sort of follows this family tree spreading out of Africa and out into the West. So I don't want to give away too much from that, but it's a really excellent book, and is one of those fictional novels where you actually learn things about people's, like, real things that are part of people's family history and part of like our global transatlantic, even current economy, that are just really interesting and different, but also like, again, plays such like a part of like our sort of social fabric, and it's done in a fictional and beautifully written book. So yeah, probably aside from like Ta-Nehisi Coates' work that I've loved earlier this year, I think that's probably my favorite thing.
Great.
I've read.
How should people connect with you online? You said you're bad at
All
Twitter.
I'm on Twitter, and I try, but you're not going to like go on my Twitter and it's going to be the best Twitter you've ever been on. All my stuff is AHYLTON26. So that's,
all the things, the Instagrams, the Twitter,
all of the things.
Do you accept
and then
random,
my email is just my first dot my last name at Vice, and I actually like talking to people I don't know, so I'll respond to you.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's it. That's the show.
Thank you, Matt. This was so fun.
Thanks so much for coming on.
So easy to do.
Yeah, this was cool.
I was a little afraid before I did this.
Really?
Too.
Were you?
I had one of those like, shit, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
Like,
I get nervous when I get interviewed on podcasts too, and I'm like, sometimes I'll like kind of jot down. I'm like, I need some good stories. I need like some like idea of what I want to say going into it, but I find
for better or for worse, I didn't have time to like think through what I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
So
same with this.
I genuinely sat here for all of your questions and was like, okay, let me think about what I actually do think.
That's really good, because I had the same experience. Like I used to write out questions and do like a lot of background research, but like lately, because I've been busy, it's kind of that beautiful accident where I'm like, okay, now we just get to jump into it together and have a conversation.
Well, it feels like the spirit of this show too is it's not like you're not bringing on an expert to cover healthcare this week. Like you don't need me to come in and have it memorized. The latest shit. It's just like actually how these people like live and how they got where they are and what makes them cool. So totally. I'm like kind of floored that I was invited to be on it.
Thanks so much.
To be honest.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
No, it was fun. Thank you.